The rain did not stop. For 3 days it fell in a gray, steady sheet, and the city's gutters gurgled and spat as if the weather itself were trying to flush things away. On the third night, when the bank messenger came with the last notice, Karim sat at his kitchen table and watched the paper tremble in his hand. "You have until Monday," the letter said. "If you do not meet the repayment schedule, assets will be reassigned." The words were a dull hammer blow. Karim read them again and again as if a second reading might change the meaning. It did not. He had built a small company from nothing. It began with 1 truck and 1 helper, running goods across neighborhoods, fixing deliveries other carriers refused. Karim believed in 2 things: that hard work pays and that promises must be kept. He stamped invoices neatly and answered every phone call. He did not cheat a client for a single dirham. That honesty became his name in a market that sometimes rewarded the quick and the sly. But honesty did not protect him from storms. A big client a company Karim had trusted. A customer whose order had been his largest declared insolvency after a sudden market crash. Dozens of other small partners defaulted or delayed. Loans he had taken to expand were called back. A rival firm, sensing opportunity, undercut prices and spread rumors. That Karim's company was unstable, that its drivers had made mistakes. The rumor grew heavier than the unpaid invoices. By late autumn, Karim had sold his second truck. He cleaned out the office. The framed certificate he had put on the wall the year his business turned profitable came down and went into a cardboard box. The workers he had hired with such care were let go. Most could find another job in a week, some could not. The landlord changed the locks on the storage room when Karim missed 2 months' rent. He watched his life piece by piece go out the door. On Sunday, when the bailiff arrived, his mother sat in a corner of the small flat and knitted a threadbare scarf, as if that simple motion could knit the life back together. Karim tried to smile. He promised himself he would not break in front of her. "We will manage," he said, and the words felt like a candle in a wind. That week was the bottom. People who had once greeted him with warm handshakes now crossed the street to avoid him. Some whispered behind his back, "He was naive. He trusted too much." The rival's cheap leaflet praising their aggressive strategy was in every hand. To survive, Karim swallowed his pride and sold his last family heirloom, a small ring his father had given him when he was young. The money paid the phone bill and kept the lights on. There were nights when Karim could not sleep. He walked until his legs hurt and returned home to sit on the doorstep and watch the city breathe. He thought of all the ways he could have been cleverer, sharper, less trusting. He thought of his driver's children, of the helper who had asked when he could start again. He thought of the promises he had made. Then, one morning, as thin sunlight slipped between buildings, a small sound woke him. The voice of the imam on the nearby radio reciting a line Karim had heard since boyhood, a line about patience and effort. Karim listened. He had stopped going to the mosque in busy times, had become a man of work and invoices, but the phrase landed in him like a hand on the shoulder. He rose and prayed quietly in his small kitchen. It did not solve the debts, but it steadied him. He began slowly to do what people do when they cannot afford another mistake. He returned to basics. Karim went back to the neighborhood where he had first gotten a contract 10 years earlier. He visited small shops, not as a salesman, but as a man carrying a box of sweets and an offer. If they had small deliveries, he would take them and accept little profit at first. The shopkeepers were surprised to see him. "Why are you back?" one asked. "Didn't you fall?" Karim answered simply, "Yes, but I will not leave you stranded." The first week, he had 3 small deliveries. He rode an old bicycle he borrowed from a friend because even a small van was too expensive. He delivered by hand, ran from one shop to another, and made sure every package arrived on time. He apologized where he had failed. People listened. A grocer, who had once refused to deal with him during the good years because his prices were too high, laughed and handed Karim a handful of coins. "You have courage," the man said. "I like that." Word moves differently in hard times. It is thicker, more careful. Some people who had been quiet admired his work ethic. Some felt sorry. Some simply took comfort in a familiar face returning. A freighter from another district saw Kareem cycling down the street with a bundle of packages and, impressed by a man who would not keep quit, introduced Kareem to a small opportunity, a municipal contract to deliver medicines between clinics. It was not large money, but it paid promptly and required trustworthiness above all. Kareem accepted. For months, he worked like a man with a single seed to plant. He rose at dawn to load boxes, rode through rain and heat, kept receipts, and spoke gently to the nurses who waited for deliveries. He returned small overpayments when he had not earned them. One delivery driver who had lost faith in honesty came to work with him for a month and watched Kareem's way. The way he called and apologized if a packet was delayed. The way he covered other drivers' mistakes with a quiet word. The driver who had planned to find work elsewhere stayed. But suspicion followed him. The rival firm still tried to secure municipal routes by promising quicker delivery at lower price. The municipal clerk, pressed by bureaucracy and bonuses, listened to the rival's promises. Kareem could not afford to match those flashy numbers. Then he remembered something he had forgotten in the years of chasing profit, the power of real proof. He began to save. He kept records and receipts in a small, neat ledger. He printed invoices in clear handwriting and offered guarantees. If something is late, I will pay back. The clerk, tired of deals that went wrong, found Kareem's offer strangely reasoned. Bring references, the clerk asked. Kareem took his ledger and showed the people he had served, the small clinics, the grocers, a pharmacist who nodded and said, "He's honest. I'll vouch for him." This is where the heart of the story turns. Trust is not an abstract thing. It is a muscle. When people see it practiced repeatedly under pressure, they begin to believe. The municipal contract was awarded to Kareem in part because he had refused to bow to quick money, and in part because the small people, the nurses, the grocer, the pharmacist, came and vouched for him. The rival pressed on with grim smiles. He could not understand why the city chose a man with little capital over a firm with a fleet. With the municipal jobs came stability. Kareem did not celebrate. He worked. The money came in, and he paid rent on time. He paid his helpers fair wages and gave a little to the driver who had stayed. He bought a small second-hand van with the profits and painted the company's name with simple letters, Kareem Logistics. He expanded slowly, never promising more than he could deliver. Success, as it often does, attracted attention, some welcome, some not. The rival's leaflets turned to angry articles. How does a man with no fleet get a city contract? The competitor's network asked. People whispered of favoritism, but the city audit found nothing wrong. They found signatures from those small clinics and a ledger that matched deliveries to receipts. The rival attempted to bribe a clerk, was rejected, and in a private fit of rage sold the idea of a smear campaign. It failed. As Kareem grew cautiously, he never lost his core. The conviction that honesty builds something no cash box can buy. The city expanded its work with him and later suggested a larger route connecting rural clinics to central pharmacies. A regional NGO that read about his fairness contracted Kareem for vaccine deliveries, a job that required exact timing and clean records. He staffed the new van with drivers he trained himself. He taught them not just routes, but habits. Check the seals, call the clinic, return receipts, apologize if there is a delay. Years passed and the small van became a fleet of clean white vehicles. The drivers wore shirts with the company logo. One by one, Kareem's old neighbors saw the name again, but this time on billboards. Those who had once crossed the street now raised their hands in greeting. Some of the young men who had mocked him at the start found themselves applying for jobs. Kareem hired many of them, teaching them trade and discipline. The rival who had undercut him grew impatient. He tried to expand quickly with loaned money and weak checks. He promised the city faster delivery by cutting corners. Drivers pushed too long. Receipts were sloppy. Clients complained. Then, the rival's system collapsed under the strain of poor quality, and an accident during a rush delivery revealed neglected safety checks. The media reported the scandal. The rival's reputation, built on speed and cheapness, fell apart. In the weeks that followed, those same townspeople who had once whispered were now ashamed. They came to Kareem, some with moist eyes, to ask for work and to apologize. "We judged you too fast," they said. "We thought only wealth mattered." Karim listened. He had remembered the nights of rain and the empty table. When the former rival came, hat in hand, asking for forgiveness, Karim did not shout. He offered him a chance to train, a position at a wage, and a stern talk about honesty. The man stayed, and slowly, with discipline, learned to keep his word. There was a deep day, an emotional moment that spread through the company like warmth. A young woman named Hannah, who had once refused a promise of marriage on the grounds that Karim was too small, stood before him in the marketplace and lowered her eyes. She had chosen a man of status then, and had learned that status does not bring peace. She said simply, "I was wrong." Karim asked no favors from her. He forgave. At the top of the curve came a moment of recognition that surprised even Karim. A national chain, known for finding trustworthy providers, called Karim to propose a long-term partnership. They had heard of his strict records and his careful chain of custody. They wanted him to manage logistics for a new program that would supply hundreds of stores across the country. Karim hesitated. The job would grow the company into something larger than he had imagined. It would also require systems and new people. He chose to move forward anyway, but not by abandoning his principles. He hired managers who shared his values, built transparent accounting systems, and opened a training academy to teach young drivers and clerks. His business model was not secrecy or quick wins. It was a promise printed in clear letters and kept. He hired auditors because he wanted the world to see the honesty he had always practiced. As the company grew into a national enterprise, Karim remained modest. He bought a small house for his mother and visited the old workshop of his mentor, who had taught him how to cut wood, to tell him quietly of the success. He sent money to the clinics that had supported him in the hard days and opened a fund to help families of drivers in need. He made sure the drivers had good rest times and fair pay. When the company went public, Karim used part of the proceeds to create scholarships for children of his employees. When people wrote articles about his rise, they focused on the figures, the fleet, the profit margins. Karim always pointed to something simpler, the single act of returning a wrong change, the days of cycling with packages in rain, the nights his mother knitted, and the claim on his heart to be fair. He would say in interviews, "You cannot build a business of trust with tricks. Trust is slow, and it is patient." In the end, the men who had mocked him, the women who had once turned away, and the rivals who had sought to crush him all had to face themselves. Some were ashamed and changed their ways. Some tried to reconnect because they wanted the comfort of his success. Karim met them with a steady hand. He forgave easily but did not forget the lesson, that people will often judge with the eye that sees only the coin. He learned to keep his circle close and his values closer. There was one last quiet scene. Years later, at a small celebration for the company's anniversary, Karim stood at the edge of the room and watched the drivers and clerks laugh and tell stories. A young man from the neighborhood came and said, "You remember me? You helped me when no one else would." Karim smiled, patted his shoulder, and thought of that rainy night and the letter on the table. He had lost everything and almost lost his faith. He had been poor, exhausted, and full of dread. But he kept his honesty. He learned the hard way that honesty is not always the fastest road to money. It is not the loudest. It is slow and sometimes lonely. Yet, like a well-rooted tree, it bears fruit over seasons. People come to it when storms pass. Karim's company became the most trusted logistics business in the country, not because of tricks or a shortcut, but because one man refused to trade his name for a quick coin. In his old neighborhood, people still point to the billboard with his company's name and say a small sentence. He kept his word. That is the sentence Karim liked most, more than numbers, more than headlines, more than the lights that now shone in an office window where once rain had slipped through a cracked roof. He died many years later, old and content. His final gift to his city was a program teaching young entrepreneurs how to run business with justice. In the records, the lesson was written plainly. Honesty costs in the short term but is priceless in the long run. And sometimes when it rains now, People remember a man who cycled through winter and kept his promises because he believed a good name was more faithful than the coin in one's hand.